And greetings, everyone, and welcome to Trenton 365. And Trenton 365 is Civic Engagement Radio. I'm Jacque Howard, the host, and you can find all the things that we're doing on social media by following the hashtag Trenton and the numbers 365. Now, I'm going to be bringing on my friend Maya K van Rossum. Some folks probably know her because she's been on the show several times from the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. Now, when we bring Maya on, this is going to be a bit of a catch up because there's a lot of things that are happening within her network and within my growing network in her network as well. So we're going to have Maya reintroduce herself. We're going to talk a lot about what's happening in the region as far as the environment, in particular, the waterway, and then also some constitutional stuff for the legal heads who are in the audience. Maya, thanks again for joining me, and I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule. Update us on what's been going on.
Well, first, I want to thank you for having me back. Your show is such an important pathway to get folks informed and engaged. And so I always enjoy joining you. But I, frankly, more importantly, truthfully, I find it really, really beneficial for our environmental protection work because so many folks get engaged right after. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
As you said, there's a lot going on. So I thought maybe I'll just spotlight 4 things. So the first thing to spotlight is the effort to keep the fracking industry, actually maybe 5 things, to keep the fracking industry outside of the boundaries of the Delaware River watershed. People may have heard at this point that after our more than 10-year battle, we finally took the moratorium against fracking in the watershed and got it turned into a permanent ban. But the door is still open for the toxic frack wastewater to be imported into the watershed from fracking that is happening elsewhere for treatment, storage, and disposal with inside our watershed, our communities, and our environments, and also for water to be extracted from our watershed to be taken to other communities to advance the fracking elsewhere, sacrificing other communities to that devastating industry. There's going to be a proposal we're anticipating at the end of the summer, which will determine whether or not our ban against fracking ultimately ends up including a ban on the toxic wastewater and the water withdrawals. That is our goal. So we're going to hope that folks go to DelawareRiverkeeper.org, follow our action items and really get engaged, and most importantly, be willing to turn out with comments and perhaps even some testimony to talk about how we don't want our communities to be sacrificed to the fracking industry, and we don't want our watershed to be used in a way that will sacrifice other communities to the fracking industry.
Now, Maya, I want to jump in because I had a couple of questions with that. First of all, for the folks who may not be familiar with fracking, in a very quick nutshell, can you just explain what it is and why it is so harmful to the environment?
So fracking is the industrial process of drilling miles into the ground, using millions of gallons of water to which the industry adds dangerous toxins, injecting that water into the ground in order to literally shatter the shales, shatter the rocks below the surface of the earth to release little bubbles of gas that then come back to the surface of the earth. Fracked gas, that is another fossil fuel, polluting fossil fuel that then gets collected and distributed. These days, very frequently distributed to countries overseas, not communities here in the United States. As you heard me say, right, it uses millions of gallons of fresh water. It toxifies it with dangerous toxins. It results in the reemergence of this now toxic wastewater that comes back to the surface of the earth that is so toxic the industry doesn't even really have a good way of disposing of it. Often what they do is they take it to communities and inject it back in the ground in the hopes that it never gets seen again. There are acres of land and miles of roadway and pipeline that cut through our communities, creating more and more sacrifice zones. And because we're talking about a dirty fossil fuel, we are talking about creating more air pollution that harms people. And we're also talking about exacerbating the climate crisis, which of course is devastating communities across the region, the nation, and the globe, and will be sacrificing future generations.
Yep. And Maya, I'm glad you touched on future generations. I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But folks, this is also why when we think about burgeoning industries and who has the power to create these industries and to create these industries just so that there could be an economic impact to a few people, not even caring about what's happening to the community where they are, and then to try to use it as to use it under the ploy that we're going to be creating jobs and providing energy and export. It's kind of weird when you think about the damage that's being done on that. I know at another time we'll hopefully have a conversation and you can bring on some folks who have actually experienced experience what fracking has done to their communities, the damages in the water system, that they can't drink their water now, and we can have them actually talk about their own personal experiences. One of the other things that I wanted you to talk about, Maya, and again, my cat Tiger is over here. He wants to jump in. If you could only speak, buddy, you could maybe tell us how you feel about the environment and the water that you're drinking, in particular here in Trenton. But maybe we'll work on that at a later time. So Maya, let's just jump back into you. So you said there's 4 things. That was one. Let's go to the next one you have in mind.
Yeah. So 2 and 3 are the other aspects of the fracking industry. It's not just the extraction of the gas and all of its devastating consequences, many of which you mentioned. Others include sacrificing kids to cancer, for example, and costing people jobs and their health and safety within their own homes. But another aspect of the industry is how the transport of that gas from the fracking well site to end use communities where it actually gets burned and causes more pollution and climate changing emissions. And that transportation happens in a couple of ways: pipeline, roadway, or ship, which is where the gas is liquefied and put on a ship and then literally shipped overseas. That's called liquefied natural gas. So while we've managed to keep fracking outside of the boundaries of the watershed, there are many of these efforts to transport the gas through our watershed to those end use communities. One of them is the PennEast pipeline. And the PennEast pipeline is about 130 miles long. It would cut through hundreds of waterways and wetlands and acres of forest in order to literally carve out the landscape to put the pipeline, the PennEast pipeline, under the ground. But what it will also do is take from people their private property rights, and also take property rights to public lands, to the public parks that people for generations have invested in trying to protect for those of us here today and those yet to come to enjoy, to protect for the benefit of nature so we can all have that beautiful nature on those protected lands. Well, when a pipeline like PennEast gets approved, they get the power of eminent domain. So they get to take people's property rights and they get to take those public lands and force the construction of their pipeline through those landscapes, literally forcing people to live next to these pipelines, which do experience accidents, incidents, and explosions that, can sacrifice, people and their lives and their property and sometimes their businesses. But even if the pipeline doesn't actually explode, those who are forced to live with a pipeline, 15, 20, 30 feet from their front yard or their backyard where their kids play, are now suffering from the ever-present fear that could happen, because it does happen, right? And so, you are really taking from people not just the beauty of the home where they live or the public park where they live, but also the safety and the sanctity that they used to experience living there. Decimating the environment and all of these natural resources, which results in pollution and harm, across the length of the pipeline for a dirty fossil fuel. That's the PennEast pipeline. But I also talked about the trucking and the shipping, the liquefied natural gas. Another thing that happens is that they will collect the gas where they're fracking it, liquefy it, and transport it by truck over big roads and little roads, urban communities, environmental justice communities, near schools, near homes, near heavily populated areas, and then transport that gas to a shipping location. One of the locations being proposed in our region is in Gibbstown. And that is where they would like to truck the gas, liquefied gas, from Wyalusing, Pennsylvania, over all these road systems, again, all those communities that I talked about, bring it to Gibbstown, offload it into a ship so that they can actually transport it overseas. Just as I intimated, it is very dangerous and it is very scary. And you're doing this dangerous, scary transportation activity in order to advance fracking that is sacrificing communities where the fracking is happening for an end use that is likely happening overseas and contributing to the climate crisis, sacrificing present and future generations. And those who live in Gibbstown and that community are now going to be forced to live next to this dangerous, scary activity, which in and of itself is another polluting industrial operation actually being constructed on lands that suffers from severe historic toxic contamination. And we are very concerned about the release of those toxins into the environment as the result of the construction and operation of this facility, as well as the impacts to the Delaware River by increasing the shipping and the dredging that has to happen to advance the project. So just two examples of how fracking happening in central and western Pennsylvania is having a direct boot print on our communities that we need to stop: Penn East and Gibbstown LNG.
I figured this was going to happen, but that's why we're going to have you come back on a regular basis. I've got my mind going back to some original notes. So I'm sure there's Stop Penn East is a movement. And I know some of these things, like the train may have left the station, so to speak, but there are ways to change the course, et cetera. I know, you said that people can get involved and should get involved by going to your website. But I want you to talk about the relationship between working with politicians who get it and who are doing it as well. And I want you to talk about Senator Hamblin and some of the conversations that you've had with him.
Truthfully, I have not had direct conversations. I think others in the movement have. The thing is, we have so many decision makers, so many players, all of whom need to get engaged. And whether they are directly representing a community that's going to be impacted or more peripherally, the truth is all of our government officials have a voice in this. And having one step up and stand up doesn't win the battle. And having one step down and stab us in the back doesn't win the battle, or doesn't lose the battle. We need the majority of the legislators at the state level and at the federal level to do their part. And when we're talking about Penn East, when we're talking about Gibbstown, when we're talking about the fracking industry, there is a role for every level of government to play. We need local government officials to pass resolutions, to give voice to the local community about where they stand on these issues. We need state legislators to be supporting, ensuring that the Department of Environmental Protection and the Murphy administration are making the right decisions at the state level, but also through the role of New Jersey on the Delaware River Basin Commission, that regional regulatory entity. It's a combination of all the governors of the 4 watershed states and the president, and they have immense power to stop or start these projects. And the DRBC is 1 of 5 votes, and majority vote wins. So New Jersey. And so if New Jersey uses its leadership power at the DRBC to convince the other governors to join them in voting the right way, we have a powerful pathway to victory. And then we need our federal elected officials to get involved. For example, when we had our Penn East press conference last week, we were calling on state legislators to get Governor Murphy to step up in a leadership role. And he's been doing a good job on Penn East, by the way, to date. Gibbstown, not so much, but Penn East, yes. But we were also calling on, like Senator Booker, for example. First off, we wanted him to join us at the event. He did not, but President Biden has a really critical role. He has one of those votes at the Delaware River Basin Commission, right? And so 1 of 5, again, majority vote wins. So there's a lot of power, and we need our federal elected officials to make sure that President Biden gets involved in the precedent-setting decisions that are happening in New Jersey, in the Delaware River Basin, that affect us, but that also are affecting future generations and setting powerful precedent for every single one of these projects to come.
Green amendments for the nation. Let's have you talk a bit about that. I love that, by the way.
Green amendments, well, it's green amendments, right? So a green amendment, like many people talk about, I have a right to clean water and I have a right to clean air. And they're told this all the time at environmental rallies that they have these rights. But the truth is, here in the United States, no, you don't. You have a right to clean water and clean air in your heart. You might have it in your mind. You might have a human right to it, but you actually don't have a constitutional right to it. So it's not enforceable. So it doesn't do anything for you. What a Green Amendment does is it adds to the Bill of Rights section of our state and federal constitutions a constitutional right to clean water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments, and gives those environmental rights the same most powerful constitutional legal recognition and protection that we give to other fundamental rights we hold dear, like the rights to free speech, freedom of religion, private property rights, gun rights. All of those things are better protected than your right to clean water or clean air. So what we are trying to do through this new national movement that I founded called Green Amendments for the Generations, we are trying to secure a constitutional green amendment added to every Bill of Rights section of every state constitution across our nation. And then ultimately, we also want a green amendment in the federal Bill of Rights. The state Bill of Rights will impact state government and state environmental protection. The federal Green Amendment will affect the federal government and federal environmental protection. So clearly we need them both. A Green Amendment is very powerful for environmental protection, and it is very powerful for truly securing environmental justice and ending environmental racism. Because what a Green Amendment does on the environmental justice front is it means all people, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, your socioeconomics, where you live, we all have the same constitutional right to clean water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments. And every government official at every level of government becomes constitutionally bound to protect the environmental rights of all the people, and they have to do so equitably. No more environmental sacrifice zones when you have a constitutional Green Amendment, right? No more environmental racism. It is constitutionally prohibited. Now, will it be an instant panacea to success and to solve the problem of environmental racism and environmental degradation that we continue to experience today? Won't be an instant panacea, but it will give us the most powerful legal tool we have here in the United States of America and allow us to put it to work for true environmental justice and environmental protection. New Jersey, since I defined this term, the Green Amendment, I wrote my book, The Green Amendment, which you and I spoke about when I first published it, and I was so grateful for that.
Yes, ma'am.
And have been going around the nation trying to spread the message of the power of this pathway, because much to the surprise of many, there are only 2 states that have this kind of constitutional recognition, Pennsylvania and Montana. But since I started this national movement, there are actually 13 states that have put forth Green Amendment proposals, and New Jersey is one of them. And so here in New Jersey, we have the opportunity, if we can convince our state legislators to rise up and advance this idea, we have a real powerful pathway for environmental protection. Now, we didn't get the Green Amendment to advance very far through the constitutional reform process over this past year, and the legislators have sort of gone home for the session. But we will have an opportunity when they come back. But we've gotten more than half in the Assembly and coming on close to half in the Senate to actually sign on as sponsors of this idea and this pathway. So we're going to really need, come September, October, we're going to need all people to push hard for their legislators to learn about this pathway and support it. And there, the website is www.njgreenamendment.org. And there are lots of things that people can do right now and need to do moving forward to help us advance this powerful idea. Look, I've been doing environmental activism and I'm an environmental attorney, so involved with environmental litigation for nearly 3 decades now. And it is through that work that I've come to see how fundamentally our system of environmental laws and government fails us when it comes to environmental protection and environmental justice. They don't try to prevent pollution, degradation, or prevent environmental racism, secure systemic reform to that problem. No, our current laws in New Jersey and across the nation, when an industrial operation comes in or a highly polluting activity comes in, government jumps all the way to the end of the process and says, what permit are we going to issue to decide how much pollution and degradation we're going to allow, and to decide which communities are going to be sacrificed to that environmental harm.
Now, Maya, I
With
want you
the
to.
Constitutional Green Amendment, we changed that. It's all about prevention.
So I want you to we've got about a few minutes left here. I want you to go back and elaborate on environmental racism, because I don't know if folks can really grasp what that means. And if you want to get into talking about like the real estate and all the other stuff involved, just please, can you just elaborate on what it is for the folks who have no idea what that means, what that term means?
So I won't go into the ins and the outs of the ways the law works to make it happen. But, I really just look at, because there are lots of pathways, but I really just try to get people to focus on the end result. The end result is that Black communities, brown communities, Native American communities, immigrant communities, low-income communities, right? Communities of color across New Jersey and across the nation routinely are disproportionately impacted by contaminated water, polluted air, right? Highly polluting industrial operations that literally devastate every aspect of their lives, their health, the quality of their lives, the ability of their children to learn by going to schools where they can drink clean water and breathe clean air. They suffer from low property values. They suffer from lack of economic opportunities, right? Higher rates of exposure to things like COVID because of the pollution that has contaminated the bodies of these disproportionately impacted communities. So, the long and the short of it is environmental racism is another form of every other kind of systemic racism that we experience here in the United States of America, is that BIPOC communities are targeted for highly polluting industrial operations and activities so that they suffer due to a much higher rate of pollution in every aspect of their environments that harms every aspect of their lives, not just their health and safety and not just economically, but even to the point where children, right, who are going to, in Black and brown communities, attending public school, have a much higher rate of exposure to neurotoxicants that harms their capacity to even learn. And so now we've reduced their capacity to learn from childhood because of these toxins that are overwhelming their bodies. So that impacts their ability, right, their future job opportunities, how they develop physically, emotionally, in every way, right? So it's just environmental racism is just by taking all of our polluting crap and dumping it on communities of color, Native American and low-income communities. So richer, whiter, more politically connected folks don't have to be to suffer the devastation of that pollution and contamination. It's wrong, it's unfair, it's unnecessary, and it's in part because our laws really are more about who are we going to sacrifice and how are we going to permit the pollution and degradation we're going to allow to happen, rather than starting from the premise of environmental pollution and degradation is not a foregone conclusion. So how do we prevent it first? And then to the extent it is going to happen, you cannot continually disproportionately sacrifice the same communities over and over and over and over and over in order to protect other folks. Is wrong. It's morally wrong. It's legally wrong. It's constitutionally wrong. And a constitutional green amendment makes it enforceably wrong. So
Thank you, Maya K van Rossum. Awesome. Maya, before we finish up, I want you to just tell the average person who's listening for the first time, empower them with a couple of steps that they can take immediately to educate themselves, as well as make a difference in their local communities?
So, I mean, I think the first thing that I would do now really is people do have to take a little bit of time to read, right? And so depending on which one of these issues resonates with you, and that's the most important thing, pick the issue that resonates with you, because that's the thing that's going to interest you. If you go to the Delaware Riverkeeper.org website or njgreenamendments.org, we have simple fact sheets, single sheet, double-sided, maybe a few pages, where you can read up on the issue and educate yourself. And then on those same website, there are links where you can, with a click of a button, go and identify what would be the right language you can use to contact your government official and get them to understand that you care about this issue and make the right ask of them. Like in the context of the gas drilling, it's going to be about these regulatory proposals coming out in August. And you're going to speak about them a certain way, which is very different than if you want a constitutional green amendment, which is going to be about going to your legislator, calling them up on the phone and saying, I want a constitutional right to clean water and clean air. So with these websites, we can help give people the language to know what's the right ask. And that's how you get started. And then you're going to learn, as you get involved, you're going to learn about more and more opportunities, public meetings, webinars, meetings in your community, hearings where you can speak up. And then that's how you get drawn in more and more deeply. But it really is all about, you know, being willing to use your voice. And I know not everybody has the same amount of time. And so that's why on these websites, we try to make it really easy. If you want to invest more time and write a personal letter or make a personal phone call, that is so powerful. But not everybody has that kind of time. So sometimes you just need to be able to click and sign a petition. And that's good, right? And we give you that opportunity too. So the other thing is on the Green Amendment issue, if you want me to come to your community, if you want me to come to your church, if you want me to come to your living room and we can get a group of folks to come together and speak about this pathway for protection one-on-one, you know, in person in that group setting, I am so dedicated to this pathway for environmental protection, environmental justice, and reform that is what I do, right? That is a priority for me. So if that constitutional environmental rights concept resonates with you most, I do all the other work too. But the Green Amendment, talking with people, educating them, answering their questions, because of the most profound benefit it provides for environmental protection and environmental justice, I'm really dedicated. I go to whatever community wants me to come to them, and we sit down together and we talk about it. And we talk about what's the right strategy for your community and how you can bring it along to get involved. So I really encourage people, you know, get in touch, because I want to partner with you to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. And I can absolutely say from experience, Maya K van Rossum is someone who is action driven, and the work will get done. Maya, thank you so much for checking in and updating us on what's happening with everything with the Green Amendment and the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. We'll be in touch soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Blessings. Folks, you've been listening and watching Trenton 365, which is civic engagement radio. Like the guests who come on and say, reach out to them, take those steps, reach out to them, tell them that you heard about them through Trenton 365 or Jacque Howard, and let's continue to build this network, and we can build a better community for everyone. Remember, in closing, it's always about justice, peace, and humility.